every honest and well-researched financial professional knows that the European Union is in trouble and has been in trouble for a while, and it is getting worse. That European banks are in trouble, that there's enormous counterparty risk, that the European banks that are supposedly in the best shape have really bad counterparty risk, both in the over-the-counter derivatives market and how they are holding European government bonds. European government bonds are another major problem. Without the European Central Bank changing the rules and starting to do massive amounts of quantitative easing, which they've done for the last few years, they've taken their balance sheet up over $5.5 trillion with basically no real stoppage in QE. It may slow down a little bit, but as of right now, it's not going to stop. And Mario Draghi should be jumping ship soon. And on top of this desperation from European politicians, it looks like, and I'm seeing news stories now, that China is about to pounce. So there are current events that have come out lately. Let me just read part of it. It's Jean-Claude Juncker, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, rips the U.S.'s stances on Huawei. The EU won't ban firm just because, quote, just because it's Chinese. And Juncker has said he won't bow to U.S. pressure over Huawei, saying that he won't block the telecom giant from doing business in Europe, merely because it's a foreign or specifically Chinese firm, so long as it plays by the rules. Speaking alongside Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Thursday, Juncker told reporters, this story's from a couple days ago on Zero Hedge, but it's from a Reuters article. Quote, "We are not rejecting someone because he is coming from far away, because he is Chinese. The rules have to be respected," end quote. But that's not really why. I'll attach the article if you want to read the rest of it for yourself. But I want to quote Kyle Bass here. And Kyle Bass, because he's a top hedge fund manager, he has disclosed publicly that he has gotten meetings with people, politicians, and other people that you and me would not be able to get. And he has said that he has had meetings in the past with IMF people, with World Bank people, who have actually admitted that, the IMF could not bail out Greece, that the bailouts that they did were bad, details that you and me would not have gotten access to. And Kyle Bass just is ripping apart the European Union politicians. He says in his tweet from 2 days ago, quote, "Europe's banks are zombies and their economies, especially Germany, need China's money. Huawei is, in all caps, the CCP and the PLA." So that's the Chinese Communist Party, and the, I guess, PLA is their military, People's Liberation Army. He said Juncker is a fool. He has always been, compromising the EU one deal at a time. And on top of this, I just saw today Ronnie Stuffley, who's a good friend of mine and I've interviewed many times here on this channel. He just put out an article. It's not in English, though, so I can't really link you to it, but he summarized it in a sentence or two on his Twitter. And he said now that Austria, I guess Austria is also having financial problems. Austria wants to issue panda bonds, end quote. So this is very interesting. We know that the European governments are having enormous financial problems. They have, enormous amounts of social programs that they have to pay for. They have an immigration problem. They're in big, deep debt. They keep raising taxes like crazy on a lot of their citizens, and their citizens are revolting. Hence the French protests, the Yellow Vest protests, where French people are protesting all these taxes that are being layered on. Their standard of living is being totally destroyed by currency devaluation, which most people aren't aware, but most people are aware of the direct overt taxation that is being layered on. But it is very interesting how European politicians are either so stupid and or desperate that they are willing to fall into the Chinese debt trap. Okay, and I'm not saying the US is much better about this, but meet the new boss the same as the old boss or bosses, because the what the Chinese are doing, it's for natural resources, but the Chinese are willing to lay these debt traps, whether in the past, it's been all over Africa. It's been in the Middle East. It's been in South America. And they are doing this for a purpose. It's also in Asia, different parts of Asia. That's not in China. And sometimes they're willing to give a tiny little country, 10 times the loans. That's the country's GDP, so they can get a port, so they can get a copper mine, so they can get oil or natural gas or gold or these things. And like I said, it's not that the Chinese are the first country to do this. This is the path that the Europeans set with colonialism, whether it was the British or other European countries. The US after World War II did a lot of this. The US and and European countries gave over $1 trillion to Africa in foreign aid since World War II, and that has been squandered. Okay, it's been stolen or wasted. $1 trillion worth of aid to Africa. And Africa is, in a lot of aspects, either no better off or worse off in many different countries. So that money has been looted. It's just a really sad situation, but this is the new type of colonialism that China is implementing. So the people in the gold community, the people in the alternative media that are saying that China is better, China is going to save us, China is going to crash the dollar, the behavior that they're doing, and I judge people by their actions, not their words. Talk is really, really cheap with me. I've been burned on dozens of business deals by prominent people you would know. I've been screwed over many, many times, even by friends that I've been friends with for many years. I've been screwed over. They didn't even invite me to my wedding. 4 best friends from college that I was close to. They just totally screwed me over and didn't invite me to their weddings. Just really messed up stuff. But this is a type of behavior. You have to judge people by their actions. So if they say they're going to do something, right, and they don't do it, and okay, maybe it was just once that they didn't do what they said, right? But if it's a pattern, then that's where I see the red flags. And I see those enormous red flags in China because China basically just wants to do what the Europeans did a long time ago, what the U.S. did post-World War II, and they're just continuing that on their own now. And if I could add to some of the things about China, this story just came out from the Wall Street Journal. And unfortunately, it's behind a paywall. But if you're a subscriber to the Wall Street Journal, I highly recommend you take a look. The people in the gold community and the people in the alternative media that keep repeating verbatim about how good China is, you know, gold-backed yuan, petro yuan, gold-linked note, blah, 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 right? This article came out on April 23rd, 2019 by Mike Bird. Like I said, it's behind a paywall. It's called China's Banks Are Running Out of Dollars. The major Chinese commercial banks once had more dollar assets than liabilities. No longer. China's major commercial banks have a funding issue outside Beijing's control. They're running low on the US dollars they need for activities both at home and abroad. The combined dollar liabilities at the big 4 commercial banks exceeded their dollar assets at the end of 2018. Their annual results show a sharp reversal from just a few years ago. Back in 2013, the 4 together had around 125 billion more dollar assets than liabilities. The rest is behind a paywall, but you get my point. And Kyle Bass recently, whether it's the long interview he did for free that's available on the Hedgeye YouTube channel, which you can check out. I linked that to in a live stream show last week, or he gave another speech at a U.S. national security event, and he said the Chinese have to have dollars to buy commodities. So the Chinese are attempting to bypass this dollar shortage that they have and all the financial problems that they have due to their explosion in the credit bubble, and they are attempting to get these other countries with their debt traps hooked on RMB so they can negotiate terms to get resources and not have to use dollars. But most of these other countries want dollars. They don't want the RMB. But occasionally you have stupid and or desperate politicians. I think it was either Sri Lanka or Madagascar, I forget where, but there was a port there and it didn't have any revenue, but it had a lot of potential. And one of the Chinese corporations, which was backed by the government, I think it was a state-owned enterprise, and they gave this poor little government more than 10 times the debt of their GDP, knowing full well that this government could not pay back the loans. And so, yes, the Chinese people are predatory for giving this tiny little government the loans, but the politicians are also on the other side of this on the other side of this deal, also desperate and stupid. And this is why I don't trust any politicians. Okay, I'm not bashing China, just bashing China. You guys know for a fact I criticize every single government, okay? No government on planet Earth right now is doing a good job. Well, maybe if you're a socialist or a hardcore Keynesian or a Marxist or a Leninist or somewhere in between. If you like totalitarian government, if you like MMT and interventionist economics, if you like Bernie Sanders or AOC, then governments are well on their way to your grand design, to your utopia. But for someone like me who wants small government, less taxes, more freedom, more free markets, more competition, wants beneficial deflation, wants, the debt system that we have, the corrupt debt system, money and finance systems we have ended, the governments and politicians, bureaucrats, central banks not doing a good job. It's just very frustrating, though, because I'm talking with people in the gold community, Austrian school economics people, and they're still defending China. So they don't see what I see. So they don't see that China is really in either no better than the US, what the US has done for decades, or what the Europeans did with their colonialism, or worse in some cases, to what the Chinese are doing with some of their policies, whether it's a social credit score or to their own citizens, how poorly they're being treated. Okay, let me check my notes and make sure I covered everything. This is not going to be a super long podcast. I just want to get this point across. Forgot to cover this. Okay, another great thing I want you to take a look at. This is free. Hidden Forces, which is a very solid podcast. It's not just finances, from Dimitri Kofinas, who used to have Capital Count on RT before RT canceled the show. By the way, rest in peace, Bart Chilton. Hopefully there wasn't foul play there, but who knows? Who knows, right? He did an interview, right, talking about silver manipulation, and a couple weeks or a month later, he's not alive anymore. He has a heart attack. Sounds very similar to what happened to Matthew Simmons, right, 10 years ago. Anyways, there's an interview with, let me look up her name, Anne Stevenson Yang, and she is a China expert. She has lived in China for over 20 years, so she is very well versed. I think she married a Chinese husband. She speaks Mandarin fluently. And she gave a great interview last week on Hidden Forces podcast. It's episode 85, Great Financial Crisis 10 Years On, Past Role and Current Risks from China. And she talks about, one of the most interesting things I heard from her was basically she's traveled all over China. She's interacted in the business community. She has a China newsletter that a lot of people in China and outside China subscribe to. She's written, I think, a couple books on China as well. And she talks about she has yet to find a company listed on a Chinese stock exchange or as an ADR, an American depository receipt, on an American or other foreign stock exchange that is not committing accounting fraud or fraud. Okay? Not that American companies are that much better. They're using a lot of them are using aggressive accounting. The CEOs and corporate executives and board of directors are grossly overpaid, but it sounds to me like it's another degree of fraud compared to a lot of other companies in a lot of other countries, Chinese fraud. And actually, I have another source that I met a couple years ago at a cryptocurrency conference, and he grew up in China. He marched at Tiananmen. He escaped before China opened up more. And he said, you Americans, because he's lived here for a while, even though he's born in China and he goes back a lot. And he said, you Americans don't understand corruption. He was like, corruption is not massive bribes or massive amounts of money changing hands. He was like, the level of corruption in China is to another degree. You Americans do not understand what corruption really is. He was like, corruption is you get offered a bribe, and if you don't take the bribe, you either go to jail or you end up dead. So I don't know. It's very difficult to confirm any of his stories that he told me, but some of the stories were just absolutely nuts. They were up there with the Miles Kwok stories that he told Kyle Bass in the Real Vision television interview about 8 or 9 months ago. And hopefully that interview will be released for free on the Real Vision television YouTube channel. We'll have to see, though. But Kyle Bass, I have to give him props. No, he's not always right on his market calls, but he's trying to alert people because he's spoken with a lot of sources that people like you and me may not necessarily be able to speak to. And he is calling out these U.S. like economics professors, these U.S. finance professors, these consultants here in the U.S. and Europe, and he is accusing them, because they are pro-China no matter what, he is accusing them of being on the Chinese government payroll. And from what it sounds like, he has the sources to back this up. That he's heard from a number of different sources that there are a lot of academics on the payroll. There's a book out by Peter Schweitzer that's confirming this. I think it's called Empire of Lies. Let me just look it up really quick. So if you want to take a look at it, pretty sure it's Empire of Lies, though. Oh, Secret Empires. Okay, Secret Empires, it's called. And he details in there, going through some of the financial document releases, about how, like, family members of bureaucrats here in Washington, D.C. metro area are getting paid like $500,000 per year to teach a Chinese kid like English. Ridiculous payments at think tanks, and people at think tanks, and husbands or wives of key people in trade policy and things like that. And from what I've heard, Bill Clinton was getting bribes while he was in the White House from the Chinese Communist Party too. So this has been going on for a while with China laying debt traps and bribes and corruption. Not that the US is not doing it either, but the people in the gold community, the people in the alternative media, they give China a pass because, China's supposed to be good. China's supposed to save us. China's going to raise the gold price higher to make everyone who has gold and silver rich. Well, there's just one problem with that now. Things have changed in the last 10 years in China. Okay, China's in trouble too. Let's assume that China has 40,000 tons of physical gold. And they may not have 40,000. The Chinese government may not have 40,000 tons of physical gold. They may only have 20. But even if they have 40,000 tons of physical gold, at today's current market prices, that's barely $1 trillion. And they have an out-of-control credit bubble that's totally unsustainable, that basically they can't cover. It has bad collateral. A lot of the assets are bad. And, you look at a country like tax revenues, debt to equity, things like that, and China is, in the last 10 years, things have changed drastically in China. And yet you hear from the same people in the gold community, the same people in the alternative media, despite the facts changing, their opinion has not changed. It's this latest news story that they're jumping on. People, these people are smart, but they're just falling. They're not changing their minds when the facts change, when new stories come out. So the stories that come out are spun to fit a certain narrative, okay? My views have changed, especially about China. That's the truth. Okay, the people do not understand what's really going on. Just like the mining companies have not adapted. A lot of the mining companies don't really care if the gold price goes higher. They care about their salaries. They care about their stock options. So the people running most of these mining companies, primary gold and silver miners, do not care about their shareholders, okay? They will dilute you. They will lie about their costs. Still lying, some of them, really badly. Well, actually, most of them are lying. About 20-30%, they're underestimating their costs. But some of them are lying even more than that. Okay, and all they care about is maintaining their salaries and their stock options. So they will dilute you. They will dilute your shares. They will do reverse stock splits if things go bad. They will do bad deal after bad deal so they don't get fired and lose their jobs. So they say they're doing things for the shareholders, but it's just not true because, again, their words do not match their actions. If you want to judge someone, judge them by if their words match their actions. And repeated patterns of behavior. More points here about China. So Georgous, he's a Frenchman. He lived in China since 2003. He has the China Nonstop YouTube channel. He just goes around with like one of those video blogging cameras, and he was just doing short little videos all over China for a while. And he has a Chinese wife there and a kid, at least one kid. And he got in trouble from the Chinese government there because he made a couple, even though it was the truth, the Chinese government hated what he was saying about China, about the education system and corruption in their schools. And they kicked him, they changed his visa, even though he was married to a Chinese woman. And they kicked him out, they gave him 30 days to leave the country. And he moved back to France, and he said that in France, it seems that things have gotten even worse in France. I think he moved back there about a month and a half ago. And he said that basically there's a lot more Chinese in France and there's a lot more Chinese money in France, and they're trying to buy all the good stuff there, like all the assets. And they're trying to dictate terms to the French politicians. And it seems to me that a lot of these European Union politicians are either bending over backwards or bending over for the Chinese now, out of desperation, either stupidity or desperation, because the US probably doesn't want to bail out the European Union as much. And then you have some of the other top China bloggers, and they gave fair criticism to China, like ADV China, Serpensa, Laowai86. They weren't saying only negative things about China. They would also say good things about China. They would show plenty of good things about China. But they started getting death threats because they had the audacity to criticize China at all. And this is the snowflake world we're living in. I mean, it's happening in the US too, right? If you say the wrong thing online due to identity politics and politically correct culture and all feminism and all this garbage, right? You're risking getting fired. If you have a corporate job, you're risking getting fired. So free speech, it hasn't been fully eliminated yet, but we're on that path. And I know for a fact that a lot of these politicians in the US and Europe, they want Chinese social credit score system. They actually love a lot. The politicians won't admit this in public, most of them, especially American ones, but a lot of these American and European Union politicians, they love what's going on in China. They love the Chinese, and they are champagne socialists, and they want to implement the social credit score system here in the US in about 10 years. Okay, just got rid of a troll. Wow, one guy just called me mentally ill. Shut up, troll. I just cited one of the top hedge fund managers on the planet, and you just said that. You must be brainwashed, dude. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Looking through my notes, I think we got pretty much everything. Yeah, so the Chinese are going to keep laying lots of debt traps in... They've already laid a bunch in Africa. They've laid some in the Middle East. South America, they've laid a lot. And Southeast Asia, they've laid a lot. But it looks like the next region that they're going to be laying debt traps is the European Union. And I will attach all the links to that podcast interview on hidden forces and the Wall Street Journal article and the Zero Hedge article in the comment section. In the information section after the show is over. So thank you for listening, and I want to thank Mark for the super chat donation. I appreciate it. Thanks for the $25. Hi, Wendy. Hopefully I'll see you in about 6 weeks. Take care. Enjoy New Orleans and the jambalaya and the po' boys. I did not eat beignets there, but they're too much sugar, carbs and sugar. I try to stay away from that stuff. But I did have quite a few hurricanes on Bourbon Street. Okay, well, that's it for right now. Everyone have a great rest of your week. Okay, bye.